Hi, it's Dwyer. It is December 16th, 2024. DwyerCrime.Blog, a free site, also gamblersadvisory.com for the sports bettors out there. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let's talk about the allegations against Jay-Z in particular and Diddy, right? Let me just point out that I'm a family lawyer here in California. I handle sometimes complicated divorce cases. Now, let me talk about a big problem that I have. It's a huge problem. With the charges being made that are more than 2 decades old in terms of the underlying events, right? What is alleged to have happened is supposed to have happened at the 2000 MTV Video Music Awards. Folks, that's something like 24 years ago. A big problem that I have with the claims, and I don't believe any of us support sexual assault, but it's the age of the underlying events. So let me talk about, quick moment, my own practice and some of the challenges I face. I'm representing someone who has a few dollars. They're coming out of a long-term marriage in California. That's more than a 10-year marriage, right? Let's say they had assets going into the marriage. We're talking about 15 years ago, right? Family Code Section 770 allows them to have the assets they had going into the marriage deemed separate property if they can trace it. But of course, because it's so long ago, they don't have the brokerage account statements. The statements can't even be subpoenaed because the financial institution sometimes does not keep such records past 7 years. Right? The clients can't trace what they did with the money after they sold the stocks. They have a vague recollection of selling the stocks. They can't tell you when. They don't have the tax returns because they, of course, tossed them after a certain number of years. They refinanced the house and they don't have the old mortgage documents. So I can't tell how much they put into the refinanced house with their separate property, right? They can't tell me the equity they had in the house or provide me with any appraisals because, again, these underlying transactions happened too far in the past. Right? They have mixed their separate property holdings with community property accounts, but they can't tell me when and where. Let's talk about the Jay-Z case. He's accused of doing awful things 24 years ago. Right? Folks, how's he going to defend himself? You have a person who is saying she was an alleged victim, right? But you don't have third-party witnesses, right? We're hearing about how tough she's had it in life, but the question is simply a question of causation. Are her injuries caused by Jay-Z? Did he do the crime? Right? Well, just understand the burden of proof, and it's a civil case. So let's say it's, a preponderance of the evidence as opposed to a higher criminal burden of proof. So the burden's on her to prove that she was not only raped, but raped by this defendant. Right? So as you can imagine, it's her burden to come up with credible evidence. Again, eyewitness evidence, forensic evidence, right? Some evidence that supports her claim that it's this individual who injured her. Well, let me point out that because she's claiming she was injured at an event, we know when that event took place in 2000. Right? We understand that there's a date involved. And we know what that date is. Now, the woman is referred to as Jane Doe in her suit. She's made some statements that, quite frankly, cast doubt on her recollection. Let me pivot here and point out that, memories sometimes can be influenced by other things, not intentionally, where you recall a series of events and then as you get older you understand that that couldn't have taken place that way. You start merging different times, different dates, different events into a narrative that might be confusing when you actually sit down and ask yourself, could this have happened this way? So understand, the woman's story has some inconsistencies. I want the people here watching this video to ask themselves if they feel that these inconsistencies are material. Right? First, the woman claims that her father, family member, her father picked her up after the alleged sexual assault. Well, understand, her father disputes that. Right? She has a recollection of what happened afterwards. That couldn't have happened. I'm assuming, too, that she knows who her father is. In other words, there's no confusion. This isn't a case of, Bob picked me up, but I didn't know Bob that well. Maybe it was Steve. No. She's picking someone who presumably, and maybe the facts will show differently, but presumably she knows. Well, presumably her father, particularly if he's the person she trusted to pick her up after this traumatic event. Presumably, her father played a big role in her life. So this terrible event, which is what she's suing on here, more than 2 decades later, we understand that her recollection of what happened after the event is wrong. Right, folks? I'm guessing a skillful lawyer could argue that her recollection of what happened that day is wrong. Not just after the event, but during the alleged encounter. Let's go further. She also is alleged to have spoken with a celebrity during the party. That's her recollection. Right? She's 13 years old. She's at this party. Right? Part of the MTV Video Music Awards. And she sees and speaks with a celebrity. Now here's the problem. The 2000 MTV Video Music Awards took place in New York City. And we now know that this celebrity was not in New York at the time of the event. In other words, folks, her recollection, which involves her father picking her up, and which involves a conversation with a celebrity, both of those facts are wrong. Folks, again, let me ask the question. Are these inconsistencies? Or are these material facts that show that she might not be remembering the events properly? Right? Let me also make one other point too. Her claim is that she was assaulted by Jay-Z and Diddy. Right? She is certain of it enough to have filed this complaint. And understand, the complaint now is a first amended complaint. In other words, they've had more than one crack at this complaint. Folks, Jay-Z and Diddy apparently were in different locations at the time the woman describes being sexually assaulted. Right? So folks, let's just say I'm expecting these allegations to either be dropped or to be settled for nuisance value. Right? And by nuisance value, I mean you're a wealthy celebrity. You might believe that perhaps this woman was actually sexually assaulted by someone, right? You had no involvement in it. You wouldn't be involved in something like this. But you get the feeling that she is traumatized. You understand that you likely defense this, but it's going to cost you money. Jay-Z has hired Quinn Emanuel. They're a top of the food chain firm in Los Angeles. Right? You understand that it costs money to have legal professionals represent you in civil lawsuits like this, high-profile lawsuits like this. Right? So you add it up in your head and you think, you know what? If I go to trial and I defense this, it's going to cost me X dollars. Right? This plaintiff might actually believe that she was assaulted. She's woven my name into her memory when I don't know her. I was someplace else. Let me settle this lawsuit for less than the cost it would take me to go to trial in a he said, she said situation. Right? Not only that, but people are also aware of the optics. Right? Someone comes forward, their life might not be working out the way they had hoped, right? They're suing you for damages. They feel they've been damaged, right? You understand that the person might be judgment proof. In other words, let's say you win a trial, you might realize that filing a malicious prosecution lawsuit might not be worth your time because whatever judgment you get might be uncollectible. So this might be a situation where celebrities, and this happens in Los Angeles, celebrities are wrongly sued, but for purely financial reasons, they decide, you know what, we're going to settle this lawsuit for less than it would cost to actually go to trial. Right? Let me also say, too, that there's a way that the lawsuit can be settled where there's no admission of guilt, where a donation is made to a women's shelter, to sexual assault, defense funds, where it's clear the celebrity is really conveying, in addition to making some form of payment or some form of payout to the plaintiff. The celebrity's letting you know that he's committed to fighting sexual assaults. He didn't do this crime, but he's settling this case for his own reasons. Right? So, again, just understand, the plaintiff's own father has a different recollection of what happened that day. Right? Just understand, her recollection of, talking with a celebrity, we now know is extremely unlikely to have happened. Also, Jay-Z being with Diddy at the moment in time that the accuser claims they were together is unlikely to have happened. Right? So, as I said, I'm not expecting this case to go to trial. I believe there's a thin line between an attorney approaching you with a valid case where there's wrongdoing and an attorney approaching you with a client who might simply be confused, might have been traumatized, might have just gotten a glimpse of the person traumatizing her, and might then somehow have conflated that in her memory with a celebrity. Right? Let me also add this too, and this needs to be said. You know, hip-hop is a vibrant culture with an awful lot of positivity. A lot of positivity. A lot of role models. Right? For those who don't know, Jay-Z right now is doing a lot of great things with Jack Dorsey, the head of Square, to bring cryptocurrency to the unbanked in Africa. Right? Jay-Z is one of these celebrities who's much deeper, much more diversified than you think. Right? I remember watching a award show where Chris Brown was there, and the crowd was cheering a Chris Brown performance. Now, Chris Brown is alleged to have been abusive toward Rihanna, someone who is in Jay-Z's stable, right? Jay-Z has helped Rihanna's career. So as everyone was cheering Chris Brown, Jay-Z remained in his seat. He had his back to the stage. He wouldn't look at Chris Brown. Right? Celebrity watchers understood what that meant. It meant that Chris Brown disgusted Jay-Z. Right? Jay-Z believed that Chris Brown had been abusive to Rihanna. Right? Now, I don't know Jay-Z personally, but let's just say I have a very hard time reconciling my view of Jay-Z with this claim that he's supposed to have assaulted a 13-year-old at an award ceremony. Also, I've read through the First Amendment complaint. There's supposed to be other witnesses there. Folks, it's not believable, but for the fact that many people in society have some warped view, in my opinion, some unjustified view of hip-hop culture. Right? So, let me just say, at one point in my career, I was actually representing a guy who was involved in hip-hop culture. And as I researched the guy, wondering whether I wanted the guy as a client, I came upon the fact that the guy was once awarded an award by a mayor for his work with what we used to call latchkey kids. Right? Kids who had working parents, who were home alone, and this guy set up community events so that these kids could actually have activities. Right? I'm not sure if these claims would even sound credible against any other community. But there's that portion of society that somehow, looks at hip-hop as, run by people who could do terrible things like this. Now, let me just say, this is not to suggest that people haven't done bad things, right? Some of the evidence against Diddy is pretty bad. Not in this case, but in other situations, right? I'm not saying that any culture is puritanical, right? You even heard what has happened with Catholic priests, quite frankly, right? I'm not saying any culture is puritanical. But what I am saying is it's interesting to me that we have the Diddy arrest, we have the situation with Diddy, and then all of a sudden this claim pops up. And they decide to smear, or at least the allegations are against, another hip-hop impresario. Right? So let's just say, folks, right now I have no idea, short of forensic evidence, short of some Monica Lewinsky type dress with DNA on it. I have no idea how this plaintiff thinks she's going to be able to prove these charges, particularly when her own father disagrees with her recollection, particularly when she is saying that she was drugged without her consent that day. Right? The problem with being drugged is it might impact your recollection. And if her recollection is less than stellar, I don't know how she meets her legal burden of proof by a preponderance of the evidence. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. Right? What I hope happens is that everyone finds a way to resolve this case short of trial, where there's some understanding and some acknowledgement that we're all against sexual assaults. Right? As I've said, I've read the First Amended complaint. It wasn't the most believable pleading I've read in my life. Right? Now that we're hearing about inconsistencies, that word to me undersells it. Right? An inconsistency is when I say, hey, I was wearing a red shirt and I was actually wearing an orange shirt. That's an inconsistency. Right? I'm probably wrong in my recollection. If I say something terrible happened to me, then my dad picked me up. And dad says, no, I didn't. Right? I say, you know what? That day I was talking with this celebrity. And the celebrity's not even in New York City. Right, folks? That sounds to me like far more than an inconsistency. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. I'm not accusing anyone of making stuff up. But what I am saying is that how things are remembered more than 20 years later might not line up with what actually happened. Those are my thoughts. I look forward to yours. Thanks for stopping by.